Hello, my kiddos. Okay, last time, uh, the King of Rohan decided to go to war against Isengard and to support Gondor, and Grima Wormtongue ran away. That's where we pick it up. Now, my guests, come, said Theoden. Come and take such refreshments as haste allows. They passed back into the great house. Already they heard below them in the town the heralds crying and the war horns blowing. For the king was to ride forth as soon as the men of the town and those dwelling near could be armed and assembled. At the king's board sat Eomer and the 4 guests, and there also, waiting upon the king, was the lady Eowyn. They ate and drank swiftly. The others were silent while Theoden questioned Gandalf concerning Saruman. How far back this treachery goes, who can guess, said Gandalf. He was not always evil. Once I do not doubt that he was the friend of Rohan, and even when his heart grew colder, he found you useful still. But for long now he has plotted your ruin, wearing the mask of friendship, until he was ready. In those years Wormtongue's task was easy, and all that you did was swiftly known in Isengard. For your land was open, and strangers came and went, and ever Wormtongue's whispering was in your ears, poisoning your thought, chilling your heart, weakening your limbs, while others watched and could do nothing, for your will was in his keeping. But when I escaped and warned you, then the mask was torn, for those who would see. After that, Wormtongue played dangerously, always seeking to delay you, to prevent your full strength being gathered. He was crafty, dulling men's wariness or working on their fears, as served the occasion. Do you not remember how eagerly he urged that no man should be spared on a wild goose chase northward, when the immediate peril was westward? He persuaded you to forbid Eomer to pursue the raiding orcs. If Eomer had not defied Wormtongue's voice speaking with your mouth, those orcs would have reached Isengard by now, bearing a great prize. Not indeed the prize which Saruman desires above all else, but at least 2 members of my company, sharers of a secret hope, of which, even to you, Lord, I cannot yet speak openly. Dare you think of what they might now be suffering, or what Saruman might now have learned to our destruction? I owe much to Eomer, said Theoden. Faithful heart may have forward tongue. Say also, said Gandalf, that to crooked eyes truth may wear a wry face. Indeed, my eyes were almost blind, said Theoden. Most of all I owe to you, my guest. Once again you have come in time. I would give you a gift ere we go, at your own choosing. You have only to name aught that is mine. I reserve now only my sword. Whether I came in time or not is yet to be seen, said Gandalf. But as for your gift, Lord, I will choose one that will fit my need, swift and sure. Give me Shadowfax. He was only lent before, if loan we may call it, but now I shall ride him into great hazard, setting silver against black. I would not risk anything that is not my own, and already there is a bond of love between us. You choose well, said Theoden, and I give him now gladly. Yet it is a great gift. There is none like to Shadowfax. In him, one of the mighty steeds of old has returned. None such shall return again. And to you, my other guests, I will offer such things as may be found in my armory. Swords you do not need, but there are helms and coats of mail of cunning work, gifts to my fathers out of Gondor. Choose from these ere we go, and may they serve you well. Now men came bearing raiment of war from the king's hoard, and they arrayed Aragorn and Legolas in shining mail. Helms too they chose, and round shields. Their bosses were overlaid with gold and set with gems, green and red and white. Gandalf took no armor, and Gimli needed no coat of rings, even if one had been found to match his stature. For there was no hauberk in the hordes of Edoras of better make than his short corslet forged beneath the mountain in the north. But he chose a cap of iron and leather that fitted well upon his round head, and a small shield he also took. It bore the running horse, white upon green, that was the emblem of the house of Eorl. May it keep you well, said Theoden. It was made for me in Thengel's day, while I was still a boy. Gimli bowed. I am proud, Lord of the Mark, to bear your device, he said. Indeed, sooner would I bear a horse than be borne by one. I love my feet better, but maybe I shall come yet where I can stand and fight. It may well be so, said Theoden. The king now rose, and at once Eowyn came forward, bearing wine. Fair through Theoden Hall, she said, receive now this cup and drink in happy hour. Health be with thee at thy going and coming. Theoden drank from the cup, and she then proffered it to the guests. As she stood before Aragorn, she paused suddenly and looked upon him, and her eyes were shining. And he looked down upon her face and smiled, but as he took the cup, his hand met hers, and he knew that she trembled at the touch. Hail, Aragorn, son of Arathorn, she said. Hail, Lady of Rohan, he answered, but his face now was troubled, and he did not smile. When they had all drunk, the king went down the hall to the doors. There the guards awaited him, and heralds stood, and all the lords and chiefs were gathered together that remained in Edoras, or dwelt nearby. Behold, I go forth, and it seems like to be my last riding, said Theoden. I have no child. Theodred, my son, is slain. I name Eomer, my sister's son, to be my heir. And sister's son, kiddos, means nephew. So it's his sister's son, his nephew. If neither of us return, then choose a new lord as you will. But to someone I must now entrust my people that I leave behind, to rule them in my place. Which of you will stay? No man spoke. Is there none whom you would name, in whom do my people trust? In the house of Eorl, answered Hama. But Eomer I cannot spare, nor would he stay, said the king. And he is the last of that house. I said not Eomer, answered Hama, and he is not the last. There is Eowyn, daughter of Eomund, his sister. She is fearless and high-hearted. All love her. Let her be as lord to the Eorlingas while we are gone. It shall be so, said Theoden. Let the heralds announce to the folk that the Lady Eowyn will lead them. Then the king sat upon a seat before his doors, and Eowyn knelt before him and received from him a sword and a fair corslet. Farewell, sister-daughter, he said. Dark is the hour, yet maybe we shall return to the Golden Hall. But in Dunharrow the people may long defend themselves, and if the battle go ill, thither will come all who escape. Speak not so, she answered. A year shall I endure for every day that passes until your return. But as she spoke, her eyes went to Aragorn, who stood nearby. The king shall come again, he said. Fear not. No, not west, but east does our doom await us. The king now went down the stair with Gandalf beside him. The others followed. Aragorn looked back as they passed toward the gate. Alone Eowyn stood before the doors of the house at the stair's head. The sword was set upright before her, and her hands were laid upon the hilt. She was clad now in mail and shone like silver in the sun. Gimli walked with Legolas, his axe on his shoulder. Well, at last we set off, he said. Men need many words before deeds. My axe is restless in my hands. Though I doubt not that these Rohirrim are fell-handed when they come to it, nonetheless this is not the warfare that suits me. How shall I come to the battle? I wish I could walk and not bump like a sack at Gandalf's saddlebow. A safer seat than many, I guess, said Legolas. Yet doubtless Gandalf will gladly put you down on your feet when the blows begin, or Shadowfax himself. An axe is no weapon for a rider. And a dwarf is no horseman. It is orknicks I would hew, not shave the scalps of men, said Gimli, patting the haft of his axe. At the gate, they found a great host of men, old and young, already in the saddle. More than 1,000 were there mustered. Their spears were like a springing wood. Loudly and joyously they shouted as Theoden came forth. Some held in readiness the king's horse, Snowmane, and the others held horses of Aragorn and Legolas. Gimli stood ill at ease, frowning, but Eomer came up to him leading his horse. "Hail, Gimli, glowing son," he cried. "I have not had time to learn gentle speech under your rod, as you promised. But shall we not put aside our quarrel? At least I will speak no evil again of the Lady of the Wood." "I will forget my wrath for a while, Eomer, son of Eomund," said Gimli. "But if ever you chance to see the Lady Galadriel with your eyes, then you shall acknowledge her fairest of ladies, or our friendship will end." I love Gimli. "So be it," said Eomer. "But until that time, pardon me, and in token of pardon ride with me, I beg. Gandalf will be at the head with my lord of the Mark. But Firefoot, my horse, will bear us both if you will." "I thank you indeed," said Gimli, greatly pleased. "I will gladly go with you if Legolas, my comrade, may ride beside us." "It shall be so, Eomer. It shall be so," said Eomer. "Legolas upon my left and Aragorn upon my right, and none will dare to stand before us." "Where is Shadowfax?" asked Gandalf. "Running wild over the grass," they answered. "He will let no man handle him. There he goes, away down by the ford, like a shadow among the willows." Gandalf whistled and called aloud the horse's name, and far away he tossed his head and neighed, and turning sped toward the host like an arrow. "Were the breath of the west wind to take a body visible, even so would it appear," said Eomer, as the great horse ran up, until he stood before the wizard. "The gift seems already to be given," said Theoden. "But hearken all. Hear now I name my guest Gandalf Greyhaim, wisest of counselors, most welcome of wanderers, a lord of the Mark, a chieftain of the Eorlingas while our kin shall last. And I give to him Shadowfax, prince of horses." "I thank you, Theoden King," said Gandalf. Then suddenly he threw back his grey cloak and cast aside his hat and leaped to horseback. He wore no helm or mail. His snowy hair flew free in the winds. His white robes shone dazzling in the sun. "Behold the White Rider!" cried Aragorn, and all took up the words. "Our king and the White Rider!" they shouted. "Forth, Eorlingas!" The trumpet sounded, the horses reared and neighed, spear clashed on shield. Then the king raised his hand, and with a rush, like the sudden onset of a great wind, the last hosts of Rohan rode thundering into the west. Far over the plain, Eowyn saw the glitter of their spears as she stood still, alone before the doors of the silent house. End of chapter 6. And now chapter 7. Helm's Deep. The sun was already westering as they rode from Edoras, and the light of it was in their eyes, turning all the rolling fields of Rohan to a golden haze. There was a beaten way northwestward along the foothills of the White Mountains, and this they followed, up and down in a green country, crossing small swift streams by many fords. Far ahead and to their right the misty mountains loomed. Ever darker and taller they grew as the miles went by. The sun went slowly down before them. Evening came behind. The host rode on. Need drove them. Fearing to come too late, they rode with all the speed they could, pausing seldom. Swift and enduring were the steeds of Rohan, but there were many leagues to go. 40 leagues and more it was, as a bird flies, from Edoras to the fords of the Ison, where they hoped to find the king's men that held back the hosts of Saruman. Night closed about them. At last they halted to make their camp. They had ridden for some 5 hours and were far out upon the westward plain, yet more than half their journey lay still before them. In a great circle under the starry sky and the waxing moon, they now made their bivouac. A bivouac means a camp. They lit no fires, for they were uncertain of events, but they set a ring of mounted guards about them, and scouts rode out far ahead, passing like shadows in the folds of the land. The slow night passed without tidings or alarm. At night the horns sounded, and within an hour they took to the road again. There were no clouds overhead yet, but a heaviness was in the air. It was hot for the season of the year. The rising sun was hazy, and behind it, following it slowly up the sky, there was a growing darkness of a great storm moving out of the east. And away in the northwest there seemed to be another darkness brooding about the feet of the misty mountains, a shadow that crept down slowly from the wizard's veil. Gandalf dropped back to where Legolas rode beside Eomer. "You have the keen eyes of your fair kindred, Legolas," he said, "and they can tell a sparrow from a finch a league off. Tell me, can you see anything away yonder towards Isengard?" "Many miles lie between," said Legolas, gazing thither and shading his eyes with his long hand. "I can see a darkness. There are shapes moving in it, great shapes far away upon the bank of the river, but what they are I cannot tell. It is not mist or cloud that defeats my eyes. There is a veiling shadow that some power has laid upon the land, and it marches slowly downstream. It is as if the twilight under endless trees were flowing downwards from the hills. And behind us comes a very storm of Mordor," cried Gandalf. "It will be a black night." As the second day of their riding drew on, the heaviness in the air increased. In the afternoon, the dark clouds began to overtake them, a somber canopy with great billowing edges flecked with dazzling light. The sun went down blood red in a smoking haze. The spears of the riders were tipped with fire as the last shafts of light kindled the steep faces of the peaks of Thrihirn. Now very near they stood on the northernmost arm of the White Mountains, 3 jagged horns staring at the sunset. In the last red glow, men in the vanguard saw a black speck, a horseman riding back towards them. They halted, awaiting him. He came, a weary man with dinted helm and cloven shield. Slowly he climbed from his horse and stood there a while, gasping. At length he spoke. "Is Eomer here?" he asked. "You come at last, but too late, and with too little strength. Things have gone evilly since Theodred fell. We were driven back yesterday over the Ison with great loss. Many perished at the crossing. Then at night fresh forces came over the river against our camp. All Isengard must be emptied, and Saruman has armed the wild hillmen and herdfolk of Dunland beyond the rivers, and these also he loosed upon us. We were overmastered. The shield wall was broken. Erkenbrand of Westfold has drawn off those men he could gather toward his fastness in Helm's Deep. The rest are scattered." "Where is Eomer? Tell him there is no hope ahead. He should return to Edoras before the wolves of Isengard come here." Theoden had sat silent, hidden from the man's sight behind his guards. Now he urged his horse forward. "Come, stand before me, Serral," he said. "I am here. The last host of the Eorlingas has ridden forth. It will not return without battle." The man's face lightened with joy and wonder. He drew himself up. Then he knelt, offering his notched sword to the king. "Command me, lord," he cried, "and pardon me. I thought You thought I remained in Meduseld, bent like an old tree under the winter snow. So it was when you rode to war. But a west wind has shaken the boughs, said Theoden. Give this man a fresh horse. Let us ride to the help of Erkenbrand. All right, that's where we stop, kiddos. I love you always and forever, no matter what.